Welcome back to Count Me In, IMA's podcast about all things affecting the accounting and finance world. I'm your host, Mitch Rochong, and today I am previewing another special bonus episode. You will hear from IFAC President Alan Johnson as he speaks with IMA's L'Oreal Giles about diversity, equity, and inclusion. In their conversation, the two discuss what accountants can do to promote and support diverse, inclusive, and equitable workplaces, and ultimately do a better job as a profession to attract, retain, and promote diverse talent. Keep listening as we tune in to their insightful dialogue now.
Hello, everyone. I am L'Oreal Giles, and I am Director of Research for Digital Technology and Finance Transformation at the Institute of Management Accountants. Today, I am joined by an accomplished executive in the accounting and finance profession, Alan Johnson, who is currently president of IFAC, the International Federation of Accountants. Throughout his career, spanning about 4 decades, Alan has worked in Africa, Europe, and Latin America in a host of finance roles, including Chief Financial Officer, Chief Audit Executive, and several other board roles and executive roles. We join today in discussion of the important topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the accounting profession. And for the purposes of this discussion, when we refer to the accounting profession or the accounting and finance profession, we are collectively speaking of the public accounting segment, as may be familiar to those in the US, those typically working in CPA firms in audit, tax, or advisory capacity, or the management accounting segment, accounting and finance professionals working within business or other organizations. So for the last few months or so, the Institute of Management Accountants and the California Society of CPAs, together with global research partner IFAC and a host of other research partners and contributors, have just concluded a look into DE&I in our profession. We discussed and focused on 3 aspects of diversity: race and ethnicity, gender, and persons who identify as LGBTQIA. We began with the US, and this is part of a larger multi-part series that will ultimately be global. And what we found in the US was the presence of something we've termed the diversity gap. Much greater diversity across the profession, but considerable underrepresentation of diverse talent among senior leadership levels. For every 10 of our profession's most senior leaders, 8 of them are men, 9 are white, and few identify as LGBTQIA. We surveyed over about 3,000 US accounting professionals and found that diverse talent believes they aren't advancing because of inequity and exclusion that still persists. And diverse talent, unfortunately, is leaving companies and in some instances the profession because of a lack of DE&I. So now I'd like to invite you, Alan, if you could help us shed a bit of light on the importance of this topic. Please tell us, why is DE&I an issue that should matter to the accounting profession?
So good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon, L'Oreal, and thank you very much for inviting me to this podcast. First of all, I just should let your listeners know that the accountancy profession is a profession, it's a global profession of 3 million professional accountants around the world. And we support businesses, which are both large and small. We support the public sector, and we support indeed many organizations across the world. And, at the core of what we do, we act in the public interest. Therefore, we must operate clearly with integrity, and we should operate to the highest standards of ethics in line with our professional code of ethics, which I hope you're all familiar with. I think we will all agree that the best decisions that are made are those that are rigorous on analysis, robust in debate, and that the decisions are made putting the public interest or the interest of all stakeholders ahead of the personal interest. And it's also, I hope we recognize that our profession clearly is a people-centered profession. That is, people at the heart of our organizations. So it is obvious that we need to ensure that we have a diverse, inclusive profession that clearly respects everyone's views. And that is why it matters to our profession. It actually also matters to all other professions. But, in our case, we are purely a people-centered profession, and therefore ethics which ethics, equality, and I would actually say that diversity, equality, and inclusivity or inclusiveness is actually also, you could argue, is an ethical issue. And as ethics is at the heart of what we do and how we operate, it is, of course, pretty obvious, I hope, that DE&I is so important to our profession.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for that, Alan. If we shift gears a bit more, building on the importance of this for our profession, what can and should individual accountants do to promote and support diverse, inclusive, and equitable workplaces?
Well, as I've said, all professions should, in fact, all aspects of society should be promoting inclusivity, diversity, and equity. That goes without saying. But I would like to start by saying one thing which pleased me. On Wednesday morning, when I read the press that President Biden had signed 4 executive actions on Tuesday aiming to increase racial equality across your nation, I was very pleased to read that. But on the other hand, I was also saddened that it needs a presidential executive action to address the issue of racial inequality. Honestly, in societies today, it should not need a presidential act of that kind. But if it needs it, it's been done, and I applaud your new president, and I hope that everybody takes note of the importance of this. But let's go back to our profession in terms of promoting DE&I. First of all, I would say it starts with leadership. Leaders have to demand that their organizations embrace diversity, equality, and inclusivity everywhere. But just by saying it doesn't mean it gets done. So it's about leading by example. Our professional leaders need also to make appointments that reflect society, which means more diverse, more inclusive, and more equitable, because these are the basic principles of humanity. They then need to hold their own teams accountable to ensure that they live up to those values. They need to set targets, they need to set objectives, and they need to measure that the organizations are moving in the right direction to achieve these. Personally, I'm not one that believes that you need to set quotas and things, or I didn't for many, many years. But I now realize, based on what I see around the world, that unfortunately it's probably time to do so and to hold leaders to account for meeting those targets. Because they're not arbitrary targets, they're targets which mean that we reflect, as I said earlier, our society, because that's what we want to see around us. So it starts with the leadership, but it's not only about leaders. As individuals, we must show tolerance for DE&I, but we should also show intolerance to behaviors that do not uphold those values. We should call them out. We should speak up. We should not accept it. And maybe what I heard you say, L'Oreal, is that people are leaving our profession sadly might be a reflection that they are speaking out, they are raising the issues, but they do not have the confidence that they will be addressed, and therefore they decide to leave. And I think that's very sad. It's very sad for the individuals. It's very sad for their organizations because they're losing access to talent, which will make the difference in terms of how they perform. And it's very sad for society at large that people have to walk away, walk away because they don't feel that they are valued as equals. So that's how I feel about this. It's got to be leaders, but it's got to be all of us. Because it's so easy to say, let somebody else take care of it. We can't be passive bystanders in this discussion. We've got to be part of the discussion, and we've got to be part of the actions that need to be taken to address this. We are in the 21st century, and we should not be talking about this as an issue today. Sadly, it clearly is, but I believe we can do something about it.
Absolutely. Thank you. That came across so clearly in the research that we have been conducting for the past few months. And what our respondents went so far as to say, which is in perfect alignment with your remarks, that it will take a village to make the amount of improvement that's truly needed in DE&I. And in this instance, of course, particularly in the US, but it's not a US specific problem, of course. The entirety of the accounting ecosystem is viewed, the professional accountancy bodies, the leaders, the academics, practitioners. And so as we bear those things in mind, how can we ensure future accountancy leaders, so the next generation of leaders within our profession and around the world, understand the importance of DE&I? How do we ensure that that message gets received?
Okay. Well, first of all, we need to talk about it. We need to be honest with ourselves. We need to confront the facts and the evidence, and then be committed to do something about it. So, I'm what I see from my perspective, that increasingly this subject is on the agenda of the accountancy bodies around the world. And the sheer fact that IMA, together with CALP CPA, holds your panel discussion on diversity, equality, and inclusion on, I think it was January 14th, if I'm not mistaken. And you gave me the honor and the opportunity to speak at that event, and I appreciate that, and I thank you for that. I think is a clear demonstration that this is important to our profession. I listened to some of the comments that were made, and I read clearly the results of your survey that you referred to. And I must say that I was alarmed initially at the results from the survey, because I didn't expect to see them. You are right, you mentioned that it's not just limited to the US, and I've seen since I joined your panel, I was curious to know what it might look like elsewhere. And ACCA has done a similar piece of research based on covering 100, 10,000, I think it's 10 or 11,000 responses to their survey. And the statistics were slightly better than yours, but they were not significantly better than yours. So that kind of validates what you say, that it is not a US specific issue. It's a worldwide issue, and we need to address it. But I would congratulate you for conducting the survey, because if we don't know about it and we don't talk about it, we will definitely not do anything about it. So it's good you've done it, and I am confident that everyone listening to this podcast and everybody else will commit to take the necessary actions to make a difference. At the end of the day, we want to live in a society that we feel everybody is treated equally. Whatever you look like, whatever your color, whatever your race, whatever your gender, whatever your sexual orientations are, for me is irrelevant. We are all equal, and we should be treated equally. And that's why I think it's important. Particularly, as I've said, we are a people-centered organization. And if we miss the opportunity of having access to the talent that's out there, because we base our decisions on who you are, where you come from, and what you look like, and what you do in your private life, we are missing out on a huge talent pool, which as a profession, we will pay the price of down the road. Plus, of course, and I think we might come back to talking about attraction and retention and all that stuff, we will impact those important issues. So that's why it's important. That's why accountancy leaders around the world must take this seriously. It must be a feature of their discussion with their leadership team. They must put in, reasonable targets to deliver the change, to make the change, and to see the change.
Absolutely. One of the key themes that came up when we asked respondents about solutions was having to implement metrics. Fortunately or unfortunately, the theme came across: what gets measured gets done. And if there are supply chain issues, then the whole lot of the organization gets together to resolve the supply chain issue with urgency. And I think the more we further this conversation, then hopefully we're able to treat this issue with similar urgency and affect the change that's needed. As you reflect on your career, you've had much more, I'd say, international and global experience than most. Would you mind sharing with us some of your personal experience? How have you seen DE&I impact workplace culture and business throughout your career?
Yes, but I've been fortunate that I've had an international career, and I've lived and worked in 7 different countries across 3 different continents, and I've had the opportunity in the jobs I've had to travel extensively around the world. And I have to say, I'll just start off, and reflect on that. One of the things that it has done for me by having the ability, and I'm grateful to my employers in the past who have given me the opportunity in the first place, is that it's made me understand the importance of diversity. Because we can talk about it in the abstract sense, but it's only when you see what it does and how it impacts people and behaviors, and then how teams are formed and how they perform, then you really, really understand that it's not just an abstract concept, it's a real value to organizations and to society to have diversity. I had the opportunity early in my career to work for an international company based in the UK, which I joined it because I felt that it embraced all the values that I obviously believed in at the time, and some of those values have enhanced even further. I joined it because I felt it was a company that took diversity and equality seriously, and it needed to, because it was formed in 1888 and most of its operations were outside the UK, in Africa and in Asia when it started, and then latterly in Latin America. So it dealt with diversity, real diversity issues on the ground right from 1888, so almost 33 years ago. So that's why I joined. But the reason why I stayed was because it wasn't just what I thought it was actually what it was. And I had the opportunity, and as you look at me, I was a young black man in London. I'm now getting to the late 70s when I started working. In what was, a difficult time in terms of, I can remember my parents, a black father and a white mother, marrying in the 50s and living in the UK in the 60s. It wasn't easy for them. I remember my grandmother telling me stories about what some of her friends told her when she informed them that her only daughter, was going to marry a black man in the 50s. It was quite painful for her to see friends that she'd known for, 20, 30, 40 years maybe, say those kind of things. But that was what it was like. Now, you can respond to this in 2 ways. You can either allow it to impact you and hate society because of that, or you can say, you know what, part of what I need to do is to show them that I'm not like that I don't hold grudges, and I will show them that there is another way. And that was very much what I think my father tried to do, and that's very much what I tried to do. Of course, 20 odd years later, when I started working, things had moved on a little bit. Not as much as I would have hoped, but I didn't have to suffer the racial abuse that my parents would have suffered in the late 50s. So I've had great opportunities to work and live around the world, to learn other languages, to work with people with different cultures. And what it shows you is there are lots of great people around. They may not think like you, they may not look like you, they may not have had the opportunities you've had, but they have value. And your task is to help get the value that they have. And therefore, I made it my task to always work in diverse teams, and I was very lucky. I remember in my first job at Unilever, the head of department was a lady. And one evening, I was late in the office and she asked to see me, and I thought I'd done something wrong. So I was a bit terrified. And I went into her office. Her name was Margaret. And I went to her office. So she said, sit down. So I sat down. And she said, there's something I've been meaning to say to you. And I was deeply concerned about what she was going to say, because I'd only been in the department for 9 months or so. And she said, you and I have something in common. Now, I was thinking, what could that be? And she says, we're both minorities. I'm a woman in a man's world, and you're a black man in a white man's world. And, I never thought of it like that. I hadn't seen her as, of course she was a woman, but I didn't describe my boss as a woman. I said, Margaret, it's obviously a woman, but I never reflected, nor did I actually think of myself as, and it's only when she said that and I kind of looked around and realized, indeed, I was the only black person on the team. Now, why do I say that? It didn't in any way, I didn't face racial discrimination, obviously not, because Unilever would never have tolerated that. They wouldn't have employed me if that was their value system. But it just made me realize that these are real issues, because she had been struggling with that fact herself. Because I think she was the most senior female in Unilever, at least probably not only in the UK, in the world at the time. There were only 2 very senior females at that level in Unilever at the time, and she was one of them. And clearly, she'd not been able to say what she said to me with anybody else. So that was great. The second thing was I was a few years later sent to work in Brazil, and I was nominated, and I was delighted to go to Brazil. I'd heard about Brazil. I was soccer crazy, or football, as you call it in America, crazy at the time. So you want to go to the country which plays the most beautiful football, or soccer, sorry. I was quite excited. I was quite young. I was single, so I thought, yeah, why not? But there was only one issue. The Unilever London asked the chairman in Brazil, there might be one issue. And he said, what would that be? And he said, well, he's black. And he said, well, that's not an issue. Brazil is a multicultural, diverse country. And they said, and how many black managers do you have in Unilever Brazil? None. So I went there, and I was the first at management level. And I think it was great for me, because it gave me an opportunity to see another culture, to learn another language, work with different people. Multicultural, it really is. But I think it was probably the first sign that other parts of the Unilever world really understood what diversity was. And I mentioned about you've got to see it to understand it. And I think my going there made them realize what it really meant. So, fast forward, the rest, as they say, is history. That's my personal experience. I was very lucky. I worked for a wonderful company that allowed me to see the world, work with wonderful people, learn languages, respect diversity, understand and value different cultures. And that's what drives me. And when I now when I bring myself to where I am today, in terms of being the president of the International Federation of Accountants, we have a very diverse board. 22, we should have 23, but we're currently 22 board members, 18 nationalities, multiple languages spoken, extremely diverse. Today we have 12 females and 10, 12 and 10, I think it is. One female had to step down because of work commitments, but for the last 3 years, we've had a female majority on the board, which is fantastic. We have many shades and colors on the board, which is fantastic. And I do believe the quality of the discussion and the quality of the decision is enhanced by that level of diversity. I can honestly say that. I've been on the board now for just over 5 years, and this is certainly one of the most diverse boards I've worked on. And it's the most fun board I work on at the moment. I mean, I'm on other boards and they're fun too, but this is true diversity in all of its definitions. And I would encourage every organization to look for that level of diversity. It's fun, it's a fun place to be, and you do much more, and you do much better as a result.
No, that's outstanding. I appreciate the aspect of this. We often talk about the less comfortable components of diversity, but I think as we shift our focus more toward the value that diversity brings, the value of being equitable and being inclusive and people bringing their whole selves to conversations and environments, then hopefully people become even more inspired to progress and enact change. And so I'll shift gears lastly here into just this action-based focus. If we could go there, how can the accountancy profession do a better job of attracting, retaining, and promoting diverse talent? What action needs to be taken?
Well, the first thing I would say, and again, it's probably not specific to our profession, but it is certainly applicable to our profession, is that the first thing we need to do is people need to see that people like them are in leadership positions. And you can't undervalue the importance of that. If you don't see yourself there, you don't want to go there. I mean, it's just human nature. You want to see a reflection of yourself to work in a team, in an organization. So back to, and I keep going on about people-centered profession, but if we want to have a successful profession, we need to attract the best, the brightest, and people that don't think like us. Because diversity is not just about color, race, religion, personal orientation, or whatever. It's more than that. It's diversity of views, diversity of experiences. And you're only going to make the best decisions when all of those come together. So that's why I think it's important that what we are seen as is a truly diverse, equal, inclusive profession. That will be the first thing that will make us attractive. Now, I must say, when I look at the facts around the world, we are a profession that is attracting great talent, diverse talent. I think the attraction piece is probably not done, because it's never done, but I think we know what to do now. I think the retention is the challenge, because people will always join an organization and give it a chance and say, okay, it may not be perfect, but I can be part of making a change. And it won't happen unless people like me, not me personally, but you, are there to make that change happen. So you're always going to give it a go. You're always going to say, okay, let me be part of the change I want to see around me. And I can't just talk about it from the outside. I need to be on the inside. So you do that. But if you get disillusioned by the fact that no change is happening, or there's no willingness to change, then what do? You leave. So, it's back to leadership, getting people in, partly done. Getting people to stay needs a lot of hard work. You've got to do the hard yards. It's not just saying it. As I said, saying is easy. It's the doing that matters, and being sincere, genuine, and honest that you want to make a change. So, and retention is critical, because we are a profession that is growing. We are a profession that is relevant to all aspects of society. And in the current world in which we live, particularly in the pandemic world, all organizations need the talent, the knowledge, the expertise that we have to offer. So it is simply incumbent on us to make sure that we work hard on the retention. And then that, of course, is linked to promotions, because you join for a reason, but if the purpose is no longer there, you don't stay. And it's not just about promoting people, because at the end of the day, people see through this. You can give people token promotions to make the statistics look good and look this, you have a picture of the board and it all looks merrily diverse. But if underlying that, it's not actually operating in a diverse way, then that's just smoke screens, and people see through that very quickly. So I think the promotions need to be genuine, and they need to be impactful. Now, as I said, I've personally never experienced an issue of discrimination in the workplace, personally. Things have been said which were not right and were offensive sometimes, but I put that down to, they need some help themselves. And therefore we should accept that there will always be some residual resistance to this, okay? But that should not prevent us from understanding that it's the right thing to do and pursue and persevere to make the changes that, that will make us a much more inclusive, diverse, and equitable society. So it is about leadership, but it's also about what we do individually. We need to have role models. I mentioned Margaret. She was a role model to me. She explained to me what diversity, equality, inclusion meant. I never thought about those words, but what she did was just that. I wouldn't have ever called it that, because now I know what it means, and I've read your report, so I definitely know what it means. But that's what she was doing. She was a role model to me. She didn't say that at the time. She didn't say, I want to be your role model. I want to be your mentor. But that's exactly what she was doing. So we need a lot more role models. We need a lot more formal mentoring to help people navigate through these difficulties. Because a diverse team, I've always said this, is a very difficult team to manage by definition, because you're going to get lots of different views thrown at you. And it takes longer to understand them, to take them into account, and to put them together. It's much easier if everybody says, yes, I agree. Meeting's over, done. Well, you might think that, but it's not necessarily going to deliver the right outcome. So, people, and I've learned this not the hard way. I've learned this because I've been, as I said earlier, I've been lucky that I've always worked in and when I've been managed and led diverse teams, I've made it a mission of my life to make sure I have diversity around me. It makes me a better person. But it's not easy. It takes much more work to do and get right, but the rewards are rich. So I would encourage the profession to embrace it, to do the hard work, and have the fun that comes from diversity, equality, and inclusivity.
Thank you so much, Alan. I thank you for sharing your experiences and your insights on where we are today and really where the journey our profession is on to becoming more diverse, equitable, and inclusive. We encourage all members of the profession to play an active role in this journey. And we speak on behalf of both of our organizations to say that we intend to collaborate together and to progress the state of DE&I within our profession. With that, we invite people to continue to listen more. This is the first in a series of discussions. We intend to continue the conversation. Until next time.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, L'Oreal.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
This has been Count Me In, IMA's podcast, providing you with the latest perspectives of thought leaders from the accounting and finance profession. If you like what you heard and you'd like to be counted in for more relevant accounting and finance education, visit IMA's website at www.imanet.org.